everybody, welcome to the studio. I like to call this my sculpture kitchen. It's where all my tools are within reach and I can create something from scratch. I can weld it together, we can cut it apart if we don't like it. I do patina, sandblasting, everything that's required to design and finish sculptures. The two most important things that I believe happen in the studio, especially my studio, are the most difficult things for artists to deal with, and that is starting something from nothing and then finishing it. So the design process that I've developed in my own practice is really focused here on those two things. So here we are in the design studio where one of the most important things happens for an artist, which is starting something out of nothing. And like a painter or a musician or anybody else that begins with a blank page, that's really the philosophy of my work. And a question that I get often is, how do you begin these pieces and how do you go from paper to metal, or is it paper to metal? And the answer is that every single piece that we create, whether it fits in the palm of your hand or is 3 stories tall, begins as a delicate blank piece of paper. Whether it's through my own folding and design process or if I'm collaborating with another artist, like in this case with Beth Johnson, the work is done with a blank page, and just through folding, the idea is to create something wonderful out of nothing. And in this case, Beth Johnson has folded a single square of paper into a beautiful, delicate little turtle. And I have a bronze example here that's finished, it's in metal, it's been patinaed and signed. But the reality is that everything begins as a piece of paper. Oftentimes, an artist may have a design that we've chosen out of their existing portfolio, or I'll have a sketch or an idea and we'll go back and forth in their respective studios for a while, just using emails and photos to help. And then once the model is completed to their satisfaction, they send it to me. So this part of my studio is a place where I can work with the paper and decide how this is going to translate in casting. Is there challenges that I need to solve, such as undercuts or deep areas that I'm gonna solve with wax? If we're gonna make a larger version of this, are we gonna digitally enlarge it? Am I gonna sculpt it out of clay? Or are we gonna go really big and actually cut this out of sheet metal and fabricate a larger version? All those choices can be dealt with here in the studio before we really get into the process. So this is where some of the magic happens. After we've developed a paper model and I'm happy with it and we have the design where I want it to be, we bring it into the wax phase. So this is my happy little wax studio. This is a turkey roaster. It's a very sophisticated wax melting device, but I love it because I can change the temperature and things like that. And I melt the wax here down is the same wax that we use in a lost wax casting foundry. So this is something that you'd see in a lot of different foundry environments. But the technique that I developed in the number of years that I spent pioneering this process was beginning with the paper, and you can see I've folded in a design here. This is one of my own personal designs of a mandala, and once it's folded, I use the wax to actually paint it or pour it over the paper to begin thickening the paper. So if I were to put just one layer of wax on the back side of the paper, like in this example, you can see it changes the color a little bit. It does start to, quote, destroy the aesthetic of the work, but I know the process that I'm after. This begins to stiffen the paper. 1 or 2 layers and I still have the opportunity where I can adjust it and change the shape a little bit, but as I get thicker and thicker, the wax becomes more rigid and it holds the shape of the paper. And the goal of any casting is to arrive at a certain thickness, okay? Lost wax casting is a very simple 35-step, 12-week process, and this original component is a really important part of my process of enveloping paper into the wax, okay? So a 2D model, pretty simple, wax on one side, not that complicated. Now how do I do that with the turtle, right? There's undercuts, there's 2 sides to the story. How do I arrive at that? Well, it takes a lot more time. And what I have here is an example of one of the very first collaborations I ever did with Robert J. Lang, phenomenal origami master. He and I worked on the paper model in the studio for about a week. We went back and forth, he brought some basic designs, I adjusted it, and once we were happy, it was my job to take it into the wax process. So I'm still doing the same thing about getting the wax just on one side of the paper. Obviously it's more complicated, but I'm also making sure that everything has a certain specific thickness. So in order for the molds to work whenever they're actually pouring the wax, thickness is a very important factor. Same thing goes when the molten metal is pouring. All the background and the experience I had in casting work for other artists is what gave me the ability to understand how to transform this paper model into something that would actually work. There's a process of mold making. Once we're happy with the final design, we're going to send this off to the foundry, and that's where the bronze casting process begins. So I'm in the metal shop, and I want to say a few things about the different kind of alloys that I work with. There are three main alloys, and that's bronze, stainless steel, and aluminum. And I work with them for a variety of different reasons. They have different qualities. But I began casting with bronze, and that's the typical lost wax casting process, and that's where I learned and pioneered these techniques. So these are bronze pieces that have been cast. It's 98% copper. So bronze always wants to be like a gold or a yellow, a black, or a green, and it really lends itself to components of my work and to really fine casting qualities. But when I got further into it and I realized that that 98% copper is soft and it can bend, you can see a lot of the work that I do is very delicate, and I needed more strength. So I began casting stainless steel, and stainless is an incredibly strong alloy. It doesn't want to change colors. It's a white metal. It can take very small welds. So I love welding cranes and creating compositions together with very small touch points. And this metal, this alloy, has the strength and the durability to go for generations. So I love stainless steel. The next one is aluminum. And aluminum is another white alloy. So whenever I paint it or powder coat it or patina it, it stays very stable in the color. But we all know that aluminum is lightweight, and that's a nice quality for wall pieces especially. I don't want to create a wall piece that's so heavy people are concerned it's going to tear their wall down. So the vast majority of my wall pieces are done in aluminum. I'm also doing some three-dimensional pieces, as you can see here, specifically as they get larger and we're going into the traveling exhibitions though. I don't sell a lot of aluminum sculptural pieces, but we're introducing them here and there. But it's a great alloy and I love working with it. It's a bit of a love-hate. It's a tricky one. Once this is done, we begin to move into the finishing process. What are we going to do? Color, patina, paint. So we have this exhaust vent studio here where I can do a patina with cupric nitrate or different chemical compositions, or we can look at paint. Powder coating happens in a whole nother facility, but it all gets to be developed here. Okay, so I've just finished the final touches on this brand new piece that I'm excited about. It's called Road Trip. And you can see I've done the patinaed bronze turtle in collaboration with Beth Johnson. This is the aluminum bunny, and it's been painted and has my final finishes on it with a little bit of pink, which is my new favorite color. And the next step is to sign it, okay? So this is a really important part of the process that a lot of people don't necessarily think about but have a lot of questions about. And Limited edition work is a really important component to my work, and we create only a limited number of pieces within the series. And there's an entire administrative office up there that you can't see right now, where my wife Jennifer and her staff really help keep this stuff organized and recorded and documented so that we get every single piece signed correctly. Things that are really important to us is that the artist names are all involved and acknowledged. So Beth Johnson's gonna be there, I'm gonna be there. It's gonna have a limited edition that we discussed. This is a series of 8, I believe. So I hope you've enjoyed a little bit of this behind the scenes process of my studio, and maybe you've learned a little bit more or found some inspiration about how I created this work, but it's a pleasure to share with you. And as always, we'll see you next time.